The Association of the United States Army is pleased to welcome you to AUSA's Thought Leaders webinar series, a webinar series featuring military leaders and contemporary military authors. Kicking off today's webinar is AUSA's Vice President of Education, Lieutenant General Guy Swan.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Association of the United States Army's Thought Leaders webinar series. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, and we're glad you've joined us and appreciate your support in the defense of our nation. Joining us today is a longtime friend and colleague here at AUSA, Secretary Patricia Barron. Many of you remember Ms. Barron as the director of AUSA's Family Readiness Program. She was so effective in that position that the President and the Secretary of Defense stole her from us to move to the Pentagon. Of course, we're just kidding, but we're very proud that Patty is now serving all of the armed forces as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Military, Community, and Family Policy. The Department of Defense, and frankly, all of us, could not have a better advocate for military families and communities than Secretary Barron. You can find her full bio in the Handouts tab on the right side of your screen. Here's a little bit more about Secretary Barron. She's responsible for a broad portfolio that includes policy, advocacy, and oversight of all community support to service members and their families. Prior to joining the Military, Community, and Family Policy Shop, she served as our Family Readiness Director at AUSA, and previously she served as the Director of Outreach, Military Family Projects at 0 to 3, and also worked as the Director of Youth Initiatives at the National Military Family Association, where she oversaw NMFA's Operation Purple Camp program. So Patty, thanks for joining us and welcome home.
Sir, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be back at AUSA. I do love AUSA, and I really miss everybody so much. You know, having spent 9 years here, really immersed in Army family issues and getting to know the wonderful people over at the time ACSIM, now Army G9, as well as the Installation Management Command over in San Antonio, I realized how hard those that are civil servants and those in uniform work on behalf of military families. But I was also very proud of what we did here at AUSA in support of military families. And so coming back to AUSA is just something that is perfect for me because Thanksgiving is on Thursday. I feel very thankful to have had my opportunity to serve here with all of you. And I'm also very grateful for the new position that I hold at the department. Just a little bit about me, if I may, sir.
Sure.
I think my biggest claim to fame is that I'm an Army spouse, and I followed my soldier for 30 years. We were married shortly after he was commissioned, and I was along for the entire ride, raised 3 kids in an Army family. And a reason I bring that up is because the issues that our Army families go through, as our military families go through, are not strange issues to me. Understand them completely. But being a senior spouse of long ago means that I really have to make the effort to stay current and to stay relevant, and to realize that even though the issues are the same, the way that our military spouses and families approach those issues and the demand that they have to be heard and to be counted is incredibly important. And I try really hard to keep that in mind.
Well, that's great, Patty, and I know your office has a lot to do, not just with families, but at the end of the day, caring for families and communities is really about military readiness, isn't it? Isn't that really what your job is about at the end of the day?
Absolutely. I think all of the audience can agree that you know, our service members cannot do whatever it is that they need to do if they're worried about what's going on back home. And by the same token, if the family, specifically the military spouse, is not feeling as if there's opportunities for employment, opportunities for career progression, a belonging within a community, and a way to raise their children so that they do get the benefits of, the military life, which exposes you to new countries and new states, but at the same time, making sure that the education of our military kids is right up front, as good as anyone else's. Then that family member, that spouse, is going to say to that service member, "We're done."
Yeah.
And so either you come with us or you don't, but we're done, and we don't want that to happen.
You're right. I'd like to let the audience know, if you want to ask, and you should ask Secretary Barron your questions, you can use the Q&A tab on the right side of your screen, and we'll take as many questions as we can have time for today. I have some questions I'd like to ask, and then we want to get your questions, so please go ahead and type those in at the Q&A tab. One of the things we talked about beforehand, Patty, was the Secretary Austin's recent announcement of some new initiatives to take care of military families. Could you describe it's just recent, within the past few days?
Absolutely, sir. I'm so proud to work for Secretary Austin. Certainly as a soldier, having lived this life, he understands the nuances of military family life, maybe more than others, secretaries before him. But he was hearing, I'm sure, and what was bubbling up to the surface were a couple of things. He was hearing a lot about food insecurity, that there could be a problem within the department with service members and families possibly facing food insecurity. Now, when I say food insecurity, I want to make sure that our audience understands that we're not talking about starvation.
Right.
We're not necessarily even talking about hunger or not having food on the table. What food insecurity means is you can have low food insecurity, where sometime throughout the year you might have had a challenge in getting nutritious food on the table because of resources. And very low food insecurity is more times throughout the year you had those challenges. But if our families were struggling with that, we needed to know about it, and we needed to think about doing something about it. So he was hearing an awful lot about food insecurity. He also started hearing about the housing crisis across the country. When our service members were PCSing, maybe AUSA might have been getting the same kind of feedback. They couldn't find housing right away. And if you remember, you only get 10 days when you PCS, and to find a place and get settled. 10 days was certainly not enough. And so there was an awful lot of out-of-pocket expenses that our families were having to incur just to find a place to rent. Rent was hard, so some thought, well, why don't I even find a place to buy? Even that was hard. And so that was another issue, that it just seemed like the two went hand in hand. It's just getting harder, financially harder for our military families. Therefore, the secretary did a press conference, I believe, last week, and announced that he is aware of these issues, many of them caused by the pandemic, and we've had families PCS during the pandemic. We've had families where spouses have lost jobs during the pandemic, and he just said, no, we are committed to getting after this problem, and we are committed to doing things about it. Here's what we're doing right now. And as you know, he raised the BAH in certain areas of the country where I think the rent or where the housing market might be 10% higher than others. And he also talked about the basic needs allowance and raising it for certain populations of service members. He also has directed us in the personnel and readiness deputy to look at and the services, to look at how we're going to get after food insecurity and come back to him within 90 days with a very strategic plan. Yeah. But I will put in a plug for the toolkit that we created over in personnel and readiness. The toolkit is called the Military Leaders Toolkit, because, sir, you know better than anyone else that you got to filter this all the way down to boots on the ground level. And if we're looking at battalion commanders, command sergeant majors, company commanders, first sergeants, and then on down to the platoon and squad leaders and sergeants, they need to know, how do I even approach my soldier? I'm at the USA, so I can say soldier. How do I even approach my soldier with a question so that I can determine whether or not they might be struggling? Because it kind of can be an embarrassing thing to you don't just walk up to somebody and say, hey, are you eating well tonight? And so within the toolkit, we've got tool that has been vetted and is used by many other federal agencies that help you ask the questions so that you can get after the answer that would allow you to say, I'm hearing that there might be a challenge here, and here's what I want you to do. And we've got every single food bank that is across America listed there, but we also will point people to AER, we can point people to the chaplain, we can point people to DECA. I've got to give a shout out to DECA. They really have stood up and have looked at this challenge and are there to help, are there to help create menus and shopping lists so that you can buy groceries at the commissary and save some dollars there. So there's a lot of resources within that toolkit that I would encourage you to go to, and it's on Military One Source. So just Google Military One Source. It'll take you to the landing page, and then that toolkit is right front and center.
Yeah, I'd like to emphasize that because, I think one of the things we've seen during our career is there are a lot of programs out there, and in some cases, an overwhelming number for young soldiers, sailors, airmen, and others. But Military One Source remains that single clearinghouse. Is that the best one?
So I've learned a lot about Military One Source since coming into this role, and yes and yes. Military One Source is the place where anyone that's currently serving in the military, and that includes our National Guard and Reservists, can go and get support for a plethora of subjects and items. I didn't even realize that. So first off, there's the 24/7 triage. So you'll always have someone on the phone that'll pick up the phone when you call within minutes. I mean, you shouldn't have to wait more than a minute for somebody to pick up the phone. And then you'll have a conversation with that person. Depending on what the issue is, they'll point you in the right direction. But did you know that Military One Source offers free health and wellness coaching? And you can have a health and wellness coach for months and months and months. As a matter of fact, one of the best stories we tell is about a soldier who needed to get ready for PT, and he knew this wasn't going to work. And yet, so he called Military One Source, got connected to the health and wellness coach, and they worked really hard on his diet, on his exercise, on everything. And he not only did he do PT and do really well, he's been able to stay on course with his new kind of workout plan. So health and wellness for those that are spouses, and I say this especially for transitioning military spouses. So if you know that your service member is going to be transitioning out of the military sometime in the near future, go to Military One Source, and we have career coaches, because a lot of times we hear, "Gosh, now what am I going to do? We're going to get out, and I need to think about my own career, my own job, and I haven't worked in 10 years. What am I going to do?" Well, our career coaches are there to support young, mid, transitioning spouses, and at any stage of your career, and can help you really think about, what is it that you want and how can I get there? We also have elder care support. Now, that's top of my mind, and you might think elder care, well, we're not that old in the military. I think our general officers know. I don't mean any disrespect, sir, but you might be at the top of the chain as far as ages go. But we have a young force, and so you would think elder care. But as those of us that get into our 50s, 40s, and 50s, we have parents that might need to move a little bit closer to home. That elder care specialist can help you figure that all out, because it's really hard. So just a lot of different things that Military One Source does. And I really want to make sure that I make this clear. We are partners with the services, because ultimately the Army Community Service, Installation Management Command, the programming that the Army offers their families is the boots on the ground support that we need. And we like to augment that support by having some of these other things and some of these other items. So yes, thank you for bringing that up. Military One Source has become my new favorite tagline.
Well, during the pandemic, I think this period has brought out some real challenges. You mentioned the housing issue, but during the pandemic, we also had issues with our children being in school, out of school, remote learning. What has that done in the area of childcare, and what's going on in the department in childcare right now?
That's a great question, sir. But and before I answer the question, I just want to give a shout out to every single military mom that's out there that had to figure it all out and you know, teach your kids at home while your husband might or might not be, or wife might or might not be deployed. And you know, the solo parenting that happened during that period of time was unbelievable. And I know it was hard, and I know it was stressful, but I just, we see you, and we're proud of you. I also think that the whole childcare issue is something that we should be proud of as well. Yes, we closed everything down, but I don't think childcare centers closed completely, because we have first responders. We had people that absolutely needed to go to work. And so, so we immediately pivoted. And the great thing about childcare centers is that they're kind of built for this type of thing, right? They're always scrubbing tables. They're always making sure kids are washing their hands, because, you know, little kids are just little germ factories. And so you're always thinking about that. So we were able to pivot very quickly, follow the CDC and the you know, and the guide and the public health guidelines, and we were able to keep a lot of childcare centers open for first responders. Slowly, we were able to open that up a little bit more and a little bit more, and that really is a good news story. The same thing with kids whose parents were maybe dual military or single military, and they had school age kids. The centers also, and even the school age centers, opened up areas so that the kids could do the remote learning right there at the centers. So we really, really stepped up to the plate, and I couldn't be prouder of the childcare you know, community within the military. Having said that, what the pandemic did and what it showed us was that childcare is not just a nice to have. You've got to have it. If you're going to go to work, you've got to have your childcare in place. And the secretary and the deputy secretary understand that. And they've actually, the deputy secretary has challenged us to really think about new and innovative ways to expand access to quality, affordable childcare, and to come up with you know, ideas and present them to her soon, actually. And so we've been working really hard on what that could look like. We've got a couple of things that I'm very, very proud of. We started a pilot, I want to say back in August, that's the in-home fee assistance program. So for those of you in the audience, you probably know that we have the child care development centers on the installation. There are wait lists for those centers, especially in 5 areas. But so if you can't get into the center, we also have something called the fee assistance program. Each of the services runs their own, and we provide you we augment what you would have to pay off the installation, so that you're close to paying, hopefully, what you would have paid in the center. And we have various places throughout the country, various centers that we use. However, they have to meet our standards. And sometimes meeting the military standard, which is the highest standard that there is, can be difficult for other locations. And so we've done 2 things. We decided to pilot the in-home fee assistance, where now you can hire someone that comes into your home. They still need to be vetted and still kind of have to go through the process that we would if we were to hire anybody to work in our centers. But you hire someone that comes into your home, and we will provide you with fee assistance to help pay for their salary, which is amazing, right? It's a great thing. There's some nuances with that, in that now you are the employer, so you have to pay the taxes and all that, and we try to teach you how to do that. So it's a little bit new, a little bit. Some families are a little bit uncertain about it, but we're hoping to expand it next year. We also just started something called the Military Childcare in Your Neighborhood Plus, where this past year, we worked with Maryland and Virginia to work with their quality rating improvement system. And if the state has this system in place where they're trying to raise their standard across the childcare in the state, then we will work with them, because we know that they're trying to get to hopefully close to where we are. And that allowed us to find more centers. And we now added I think 2 additional states to that mix, and we're looking at adding 3 more. So that'll provide more opportunities for access to fee assistance. We've also just, for those of you out there that are needing hourly care, or you need to drop your child off, or you need a babysitter to come to your house, we've partnered with Sitter City. And if you go on to Military One Source, we have waived the registration fee, so you can go right into the the portal there, and you can put in your information, and a list of people will come up, and of course it's up to you to talk to them and vet them and all of that, but they've had their background checks done, and you know, they can be trustworthy. So we're trying really hard to get after childcare. I know the services are working really hard to get after childcare, but there's just never enough childcare because we have a young force.
We do.
And,
We do.
you know, we're always going to have young people coming in. We're always going to have babies, toddlers, and children.
You know, part of that, you know, is cost, and we talked about the potential food insecurity issue. How much of that is related to financial management or education for financial management, especially for young service members? What kind of initiatives are going on to help them manage their money better?
So, you know, the Force Readiness Office has financial readiness under their portfolio. And I know they've worked really hard and have made great strides to help educate. I think when you first come into sessions, or, you know, maybe when you're at basic training, you'll get some financial readiness training there. And I think you also have them throughout your military career when something changes, whether you go to a new school or something happens within your family, you add a child or whatnot. I also know that they've worked very hard to create a military spouse program, because you know, we're the ones that stay home, and we're the ones that usually pay the bills and kind of manage the budget. But that isn't really enough, sir. I think what we're looking at, and when you think about our service members, we've got risk factors built in there. First off, we get them at age 18. 18-year-olds need to be taught how to manage their budget, right? And so, you know, they're young, and that's their youth is a risk. Some come in with a built-in family already, and so you're going to be on E1 to E3 pay with a family. That's going to be difficult, you know, stretching those dollars. Sometimes childcare is not an option because you don't make enough to even pay for the childcare. So that spouse stays home, and that means you don't have a dual income family. And right now across the country, dual income families are the norm. And I know that in the military, we want dual income families if that's what they would like to do, but it's difficult. So that youth is a risk. The next time I think you're looking at risk is when you're PCSing. You know, the cost of PCSing, the out-of-pocket expenses, you could get up to $5,000 of out-of-pocket expenses. I mean, it's expensive, and you have to factor all of that in, and then the unexpected. You know, the emergencies, the spouse that maybe has not been employed because of COVID, or because of PCS, or because of a lot of other reasons. So when you talk about financial management, I think what we're looking at realistically is, how do you, from the beginning, think about not the right now, but a little bit about the future, because those families or those service members that have put a little bit away for a rainy day have something to draw from. But when that goes away, then what? So you really then talk about, you know, compensation. We compensate our 18-year-olds well compared to other 18-year-olds, but maybe our 18-year-olds might have family members that they have to send money to. Maybe our 18-year-olds have a built-in family, you know, maybe. So there's a lot of nuances there that we need to take into consideration. But financial readiness training is key to helping folks kind of figure out, you know, the way ahead.
Yeah. And you know, along with housing, recently the department published a family housing bill of rights. Could you update us on how has that been proliferated to the force now, and how have people responded to that?
Yeah, definitely, sir. I think I was at AUSA when they were working on it. And so we were in some meetings, if you remember, and we were also here when the housing crisis exploded, and we knew that there were so many problems, you know, with mold, mildew, and other things in houses. And I think that the services certainly have gone after that really rigorously, and I've tried to, you know, make that topic better, and more. Leadership is much more aware of it. But what came out of all of those conversations was that there was no housing bill of rights, tenant bill of rights. And so this tenant bill of rights now has been released. You can find it on Military OneSource. If you don't know where it is, go to Military OneSource. And you've got avenues if things aren't working well for you. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that everything's working great. I know enough to know that there are challenges still, but with this tenant bill of right, it's a document that you can take with you and say, it says this right here, and my expectation is that this will be done, and you should be backed up.
Yeah. I've got a question here that came in from Larry, and what have you discovered that, in terms of differences in how the services provide the programs to their service members in your portfolio? And are we sharing best practices between the services and among the services?
So that's a great question, Larry. Thank you. What I would tell you is you have to make the effort to build relationships and to understand where our different areas of influence are. As my husband would say, look at your area of influence, and that's what you can do. So I've made a real effort to get to know at the secretariat level the military and reserve affairs folks, the MNRAs,
Right.
and develop relationships with them, as well as the programmatic folks and at the service level. What I really admire about the services is how passionate they are about taking care of their own. Absolutely. I mean, I'm a soldier's wife, and I truly do love soldiers and their families. I love everybody else too now, but you know what I mean. So every service is passionate about their group of people, and the opportunity for us to augment that support and to come in and work together on policy, on issues, so that any kinks can be worked out ahead of time is really, really crucial. And I really feel strongly that we are built, those relationships existed already, but I'm a relationship person. I like to get out there. I like to, make those relationships even stronger. So I think that as we move forward with some of the new initiatives that are coming down the pike, we will be working even closer with our service counterparts to make sure that, we all can do this together. And really, ultimately, it's for the best for our military families. We want them to thrive.
Absolutely. Karen's got a good question here about, we talked briefly before about spouse employment. When it comes to military spouse employment, do you feel that employers are going to listen to the First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, and the Joining Forces program? You might want to talk about joining forces a bit. When they ask employers to step up and hire our spouses, do you see that having an impact? And how is joining forces going?
So I'll answer the question and I'll tell you about joining forces, because
Okay.
I love joining forces. So yes, and the reason I say that is there's an awful lot of wonderful organizations out there. So I'm only going to talk about one, but I mean all of you when I say a name. So Hiring Our Heroes works very, very closely with joining forces and the White House to talk about hiring military spouses. But it's not just hiring them; it's retaining them. How do you retain them in a mobile environment? And I would say that at the Department of Defense, through the Spouse Education Career Opportunities, specifically the Military Spouse Employment Partnership, we're up to 540 partners.
Really?
Yeah, 540 corporations out there, businesses and whatnot. Now, there was not a mandate before for those companies to report the hiring of military spouses. We would ask them, but sometimes they didn't know, they weren't sure, because technically you're not supposed to ask the question, are you a military spouse? It's against the law. But you can make it easier to find out if you had like a little, demographic little, please check if you're a military spouse, and then that way you could decide if you wanted to or not. I don't know if you can do that. That might be illegal, so don't quote me. But there might be ways to find out. And the reason I say that is because the new partners that have just come in have been told that they have to report the hires for us. That way we can track that. I believe that right now we're saying like 210,000 military spouses have been hired since MSEP began 10 years ago. And a lot of that has to do with the bully pulpit, has to do with Dr. Biden, has to do before with Mrs. Obama and Dr. Biden and joining forces. Joining forces, if you don't know, is a phenomenal initiative that's been rolled out by the White House, specifically the Office of the First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden. And she has very much raised her hand to say, I'm going to continue to support our military families. And there's a report that just came out maybe about 2 months ago called Strengthening America's Military Families. It's the Joining Forces report. And they lay out what they're hoping to do. Getting back to spouse employment, one of the things that we're really excited about is the fact that that a lot of our federal partners now are raising their hand to say that they will hire military spouses. And so we've onboarded several federal agencies onto as MSEP partners, and Social Security Administration, Department of Interior, to name a few. And that's exciting because if we can get military spouses into the government service, the ability for them to retain employment increases exponentially. It's something that we all know in our world that we travel with. I mean, that we PCS and whatnot, and those jobs can travel with you. Now, with the new environment of COVID and the fact that we've been doing a lot of telework, and there's been more opportunity for remote work, there might be even more opportunities for military spouses to gain employment and keep it, even if they're PCSing, because PCSing is probably the hardest, rock or wall to break through when it comes to military employment. But going back to joining forces, we've been so incredibly fortunate to have a great relationship with the White House and with joining forces. Rory Brosius is the executive director of Joining Forces, and Libby Jameson, who's another great friend, member of MSJDN. They've done some of their activities here at AUSA. She's also a senior advisor there. We have May Cabot over at the Department of Veterans Affairs, who is really looking at families as they transition from active to veteran status. So there's an awful lot of really good work and talk about military families right now at every level.
Yeah, that's good. And yesterday, I think the President and First Lady were at Fort Bragg for Thanksgiving meal with some of the troops there, and they were talking about joining forces and how that program is running. A good question here from Steve. This may or may not fall into your area, Patty, but EFMP, the Exceptional Family Member Program, is different across the services. How are you addressing enrollment and support services like respite care so that those stationed at joint bases can get the same care as they would get in their parents' service?
Steve, thank you. Thank you for that question. It's been something we have been working on, and it does fall in my portfolio for quite some time. We have the Office of Special Needs within MCNFP. The Congress directed us to standardize EFMP in FY either 20 or 21
across
the services. And they wanted us to look at 4 different areas: enrollment, disenrollment, PCS, or moving from one place to the other, and also respite care. And I'm very happy to tell you that we've made great strides on all those areas. There's been a working group of all of the service representatives plus OSD, and gosh, the folks that are on that group have been working so hard to try to figure out all the nuances that go along with it. We've got a report to Congress that is due on the 1st that we think we're going to get in before the 1st of December. Yay us! And I think we're working on the DOTI, which I had to find out what DOTI meant. But what DOTI means is Department of Defense Information, right? No, instruction. That's it.
Yeah. DODI.
Yes.
DODI.
I'm working on the DOTI now that's going to put all those standardizations into place. And so we hope very soon that you're going to see a difference in at least those 4 areas, because you're absolutely right, Steve. If you're at a joint base and you're an Army family, and then you go to but they happen to have an Air Force EFMP office, that it can kind of get very, very difficult very quickly. The other thing that I'll tell you is I've charged my folks with reimagining Military OneSource. I said, we can do so much more with Military OneSource. And one of the things that people have said to me is, every time we move, we have to fill out all these forms, and you're always having to fill out the same forms. And so we're really thinking about, what can we put on Military OneSource that's the form that'll be kind of kept there, and then when the time comes, you go back and you just update it and send it off. So we're thinking about those kinds of things. I'm hoping that before I leave, maybe 3 years, that will be taken care of. But I want you to know that we are thinking about it and trying to get after it.
Good, good. Over half of the armed forces is in the reserve components, the National Guard and the reserves from all the services. What kind of challenges are they facing in your portfolio? Most of us grew up on military bases and we had the safety net of those installations, but those service members don't have that. So what are you seeing there?
Well, I certainly know that through COVID, we've leaned so heavily on our reserve component, service members and families, not to mention the deployments that they've also been a part of. And so
Right.
there's been an awful lot of activity with our reserve and guard families and service members. I've actually been looking at my portfolio to say, are we bringing the voice of the Guard and Reserve into the discussions? Because it's important that we do different types of support in terms of maybe they don't move as much, although some do, but still, when things happen quickly and they get not very much notice to have to go and do something for the state because the National Guard has been called up, or when they've been federalized to support in one way or another, those families go through quite a bit as well. So what I can tell you is that we are looking at our portfolio, making sure that Guard and Reserve families know that they can access our programs and our support. And at the same time, I'm excited to tell you that Sesame Workshop, which was under the Defense Health, it was under Health Affairs, now is going to be coming over to MCNFP. And I just spoke with the folks at Sesame the other day, and I said, one thing that I think we really need to do is think about how we're calling out support for the Guard and Reserve, because a lot of the products that they have are about moving or about those kinds of things, and we have to think a little bit more broadly. And they were all over that. They're like, oh, we've been thinking the same thing, absolutely. And I have to thank one of our AUSA members for that, because when I was in the seat, and Thea and I would hand out the coloring books or whatever it was, and that you could order from us. Us as an AUSA, I'll always be a part of AUSA. Some of the chapter leaders would say, Patty, but this doesn't really speak to the families that we have in our footprint. And so we're really going to try to get after that.
Good. Well, Rose has a really good question here, and it's kind of back to the issue of the allowances that the Secretary talked about recently. And the question is the Secretary advocating for any policy changes that could create a more permanent help for families? Specifically, Rose wants to know, BAH and some of these other allowances raise the income of our soldiers so they're not eligible for other programs like SNAP or WIC or some of those.
So I can't speak for the Secretary, but what I can tell you is that in both the Senate and the House version, there is language about SNAP and WIC and basic needs allowance. The House version, I think, does not include BAH in the calculation, whereas the Senate version does. And as many of the audience members know, because you've got a very smart audience, they still have to go to conference and figure out, which is, when both sides come together to figure out what they're going to keep, and which eventually becomes the NDAA bill, which eventually gets signed into law by the president. So we know there are conversations around that right now. And I would say that many of our advocates, our military support organizations, are doing an awful lot of legwork to bring attention to that specific issue.
Yeah, I was going to close with this, but since you raised groups like AUSA and others, what can we do in the nonprofit world? There's a lot of organizations in the military coalition, especially, that can help our service members, but where would you advise us to help out the most?
Well, you've already helped a lot. You really, truly have. I first, by being here and by having the invitation to come here, thank you so much and giving me the opportunity. I was also invited to go to the AUSA Family Forums and was able to share there. So personally, thank you for that. But we had an MSO VSO call probably back in August, where we were talking about the active duty spouse survey. And we were talking about how we've changed it, how we've made it shorter, how we even have a QR code that you could scan so you could get to it quicker. And we said, we really are trying to get the word out so that we can increase, folks to take the survey. Thanks to you, it looks like we're up to 20% of having surveys come back to us. We were at 11%. So already the MSOs being kind of that voice for us as well. There's so many influencers out there. There's so many people that have great networks. So, following us on social media, kind of seeing what we're up to. There's some really great, if you go to the Military One Source Facebook page, super, super great information there. We recently had, just real quick, sir, you know how I talk. We recently had a wonderful relationship summit that went extremely well. We had over 2,000 people sign up to participate. And part of the conversation was about what to do when you break up for single service members, because, single service members go through lots of, maybe not lots, but sometimes they'll break up with a significant other and it really can get to them. So we talked about that type of relationship. We talked about parents and children and that type of relationship. And we talked about marital relationship. You can find those all on the Military One Source Facebook page. So really kind of keeping up with what we're doing. And from my end, we have said we want to make sure that we have great relationships with our MSO and BSO partners. So as things come up, we'll be reaching out to have smaller, intimate groups of discussion around specific topics that we think might be of interest to the different MSOs.
Good. This may be a little bit out of your lane. I don't want to put you on a spot, but there's been a lot of changes over the last couple of years. You and I have monitored in medical care and healthcare for our service members with the emergence of the Defense Health Agency and some restructuring. How are you seeing that from your perspective?
I do know that healthcare is still one of the number one reasons why people might stay in the military.
That's right.
It's such a wonderful, wonderful benefit. And certainly the type of care that you receive sometimes depends on the location or the people, right? I mean, that's on the outside like it is on the inside. What I know where we struggle is on behavioral health, especially for children. There just aren't enough people out there that would see children in the public sector, the general public sector, and there certainly aren't enough in the military. One thing that we've done is we're really proud of how we've embedded a military family life counselor into a behavioral health clinic, and we've done it at Fort Hood. The reason being is that, they have a lot of people that want appointments, but not every appointment needs to have a psychologist or MSW, a licensed clinical social worker work with you. Many of them, if you can just be that it's just life getting in your way and the stressors of life, a military family life consultant can definitely help with that. So it's a lot of, so what we're trying to do is we're trying to lessen the burden on the behavioral health folks by saying we are a resource here too, and we can help. So that's an area that I know is of concern. Another area for our families out there with ESMP family members, and specifically kids that might be on the autism spectrum, we know that there's a lot of concern about ABA therapy and some of the other things that they have now and what might or might not change. So all of those discussions are going on, and I promise that we're trying to keep the military family in the back of our minds.
Yeah,
always.
Good. We got a lot of questions, but one we discussed briefly before we came on was the stresses you described, behavioral health and all that. One of those that's one of the more unfortunate symptoms of what we've been going through is domestic violence. Mm-hmm. And what is the department doing looking at that as an issue? Has there been an uptick in that, and what's the department trying to do?
Definitely the department and the secretary and the DepSec secretary are very, very concerned and worried about sexual assault and domestic violence.
Right.
We had the IRC, that the independent
The
review
Ford Hood,
committee,
after the
the
Ford Hood.
committee that
Yeah.
convened and talked about as a whole how is the department getting after these things. Domestic violence, because of FAP, Family Advocacy Program, falls under my portfolio as well. And I'm very proud of the work that the team has done, because we're going to be briefing the leadership sometime soon on the way ahead. There was a GAO report, a General Accounting Office report that had 32 recommendations that they felt could help make the FAP program stronger. And so we're looking at all of those, agreed with all of them. How do we incorporate them? How do we get to where we need to go? The other thing that I would say is that you talked about how can we help. We are working really hard to create a communication strategy, because all of us have been in friend relationships where you might wonder, gee, I wonder if something's going on,
That's right. Yeah.
or maybe a stranger. If you're in a unit, I know when Mike was a battalion commander, he had spouses come to his office and say, this is going on, or, you need to do something. And so we all know that if you could send someone to the FAP office, there's a FAP office at every single installation, family advocacy program. The professionals there can be supportive and they can help. But there are more things to come. We need to do more. We have to do more. And what I can say is that we're working on it very, very heavily.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it's been a stressful period for everyone, not the least of which has been our family members on our installations and in the Garden Reserve. Well, Patty, we could go on for a long time here, and it's great to have you back at AUSA. You always have a room here, have a family here. We miss you a lot, but we couldn't, as I mentioned in the opening, we couldn't have a better advocate in the position that you're in. So we wish you all the best going forward. A happy Thanksgiving to you.
Thank you, sir. I'm so happy to be home. Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving to you. And to all of you watching, thank you for tuning in.
Well, before we wrap up, I'd like to bring everybody up to speed on some of our upcoming events here at AUSA. Continuing with some of the discussion we just had with Secretary Barron, on the 7th of December, we'll host our first in-person Hot Topic Symposium here at AUSA headquarters, the first one we've had in about the last 18 months on holistic health and the soldier. That'll be hosted by the Army Surgeon General, Lieutenant General Scott Dingle, a day-long event to get into issues of holistic health and our soldiers. On the 9th of December, we'll host another Thought Leaders webinar like this one on Special Operations Forces, featuring N.W. Collins, author of Gray Wars, A Contemporary History of U.S. Special Operations, Jessica Donati, author of Eagle Down, The Last Special Forces Fighting the Forever War, and Tony Brooks, author of Leave No Man Behind, The Untold Story of the Rangers, and let me get my notes here, and the unrelenting search for Marcus Luttrell, the Navy SEAL, the lone survivor in Afghanistan. Our next noon report will be on the 13th of December, featuring Command Sergeant Major Andrew Lombardo, the 14th Command Sergeant Major of the Army Reserve. And don't forget, the AUSA Global Force Symposium and Exposition will be 29 to 31 March 2022 in person in Huntsville, Alabama. And we're very excited to be able to get back and rejoin our friends in the Huntsville and Redstone Arsenal community. They've been a terrific host for this event for many, many years, and we look forward to getting back to Huntsville. As you can see, we have a lot of events coming up here at AUSA, and we hope that you can join us for all or some of them. For more information about any of these events or anything going on at AUSA, or to register, please go to the ausa.org website, and we have all the information you need right there. Finally, it goes without saying that we thank you for your membership in AUSA. Membership matters. We frankly cannot do these events and support America's Army without your membership. So if you want to check your membership status or join AUSA, just go to ausa.org and you can get more information on joining AUSA. Well, thanks again, Patty. We miss you. All the best to your family and the team in your department. We're counting on you in the coming year. And for everyone else online, thank you very much for attending and have a great Army Day.